בשם השם נעשה ונצליח, שיעור תורה, ברוכים הבאים, שבוע טוב, שבוע מבורך. We're trying a new, better camera that's giving us worse results, Baruch HaShem. So don't complain, I already know. There's nothing I can do about it. Shiur is more important than the camera, I guess. Anyway, we are continuing, Baruch HaShem, our BeEzrat Dishmaya, our series of Jewish HaShkafa. To be honest with you, so many questions coming in these days that have to do with this series that I'm constantly forwarding people the link to the playlist of the series, because the overwhelming majority of questions that people have about Judaism, about the Torah, about their understanding of certain psak halacha from the rabbis, certain issues with their marriage, issues with their kollel, issues with tshuva, and so on, have to do with the fact that people do not have the right HaShkafa, do not have the right ideology. And unfortunately, many people are spiritually lazy. They don't want to study, they don't want to learn Torah, and they just want everything handed to them on a silver platter. And even when it is handed to them on a silver platter through a series, they still say, yeah, but it's 30 lectures in. I mean, it's a lot of time. And the reality is you can't really help people that don't want to help themselves. And that's one of the rules that I try to keep very strongly with certain people, where when I see that a person is not willing to invest their time into learning our shiurim, there's really not much that I can do to help such a person. So again, if you are watching our shiurim, most of the time, most of the questions that you have are already answered in the shiurim. And if still something is unanswered, you're more than welcome to ask the question. But a person that's not really watching our shulim on a regular basis, doesn't really know what's what and who's what and everything else, and still wants to get answers to the questions, it certainly won't work. It certainly won't work, because even if I give a person an answer, without them watching our shulim, they usually won't even understand the follow-up and what it really means. So I highly recommend for people to watch the lectures, because they're not being done just for entertainment purposes. They're done to answer a lot of the questions that people have. With that being said, we're going to continue the series based on the Chazon Ish. Baruch Hashem, we have the merit to get this series, get these lectures to countless people around the world, even people that are of the family of the Chazon Ish that we had with the time of the Ramban. We met some people from the Ramban's family. And Baruch Hashem, many of the other series that we have, it's interesting to find different Talmidei Chachamim, different family members of these Chachamim that we talk about on a regular basis, that happen to BeEzrat Dishmaya watch our lectures and appreciate them. So I highly recommend that people, again, share these lectures, watch them carefully, and if you are at a very beginning stage, then obviously continue watching. But if you've already been watching me for some time, then I would recommend that you study these lectures. Study them, meaning take a pen and paper and write down notes of different things that I say in the name of the Torah that stand out to you, so you can remember it better and perhaps even review it at different times and use it for your life. Tonight's shiur will be for a... let's see, 1 second. Ilui Nishmat Shlomo ben Linda, and Yitzchak ben Linda, and Linda bat Sarah, and also leavdil for a refuah shlema for Elnatan ben Rachel, Shirel bat Rachel, and Liora bat Ala, Yitzchak ben Liora, Sarah bat Sausan, Emma bat Dvora, Rachel bat Pala Parel, Esther bat Tzipora, Benjamin ben Abayich, Reuven Chaim ben Pala Parel, Shmuel Yitzhak ben Pala Parel, Naftali Tzvi ben Pala Parel, Avigail bat Surya, Stefan ben Katarina, Yitro ben Avraham, Talia bat Sarah, Michal bat Yael, Orit bat Ilana, our very dear Rabbi Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, David ben Esriya, Doris bat Jorah, and also for a Atzlacha Rabba for Shaul ben Farzane, Yitro ben Avraham, Oshri ben Doris, Gabi ben Doris, Elad ben Doris, David ben Esriya, Marsha bat Julie, Ayla bat Marsha, Samuel ben Marsha, and Alexander ben Marsha, and actually for a Atzlacha Rabba, not Refuah Shlema. That's what happens. Of Reuven Chaim ben Pala Parel, Rachel bat Pala Parel, Yitzhak ben Pala Parel, Naftali Tzvi ben Pala Parel. הקדוש ברוך הוא יברך אותם בכל מכל כל, חיים ארוכים, שלמים, מלאים תורה, מצוות, גמילות חסדים, נחת וברכה בכל מעשה ידיהם, and to all of the wonderful supporters that are helping us and really doing everything they can to get these lectures out there, to get people to learn them. BeEzrat HaShem, we'll continue praying for them, continue trying to get the mercy of HaShem to help each and every single one of you get to where you need to be. So the question is, what is a healthy Jew? What is a healthy Jew? Of course, I mean, you could always talk about the scientific aspect of it, and you're going to have 10 different doctors and nutritionists, and each one of them is going to tell you different ways to get the health. But if you ask a Talmid Chacham, typically they're not going to spend so much time on the physical health of a person, but rather on the spiritual health of a person, simply because there are many people that are physically healthy, but spiritually dead. Spiritually dead, as the Gemara in Masechet Brachot says, that Reshaim Kroim Metim even Bechayim, that the people that are wicked are considered dead, not just sick, dead, even during their life. So, of course, none of us, have felt, if we were at one point or another acting wicked, that we were spiritually dead, because you're still walking among the rest of the people in the world. But the reality is that there are many people that are spiritually dead. And rather than spend much time talking to you about nutrition and that you should sleep a certain amount of time, you should eat a certain amount of diet, there's plenty of people already doing that. Our focus has been and always will be your spiritual health, because many people walk in the world and live in a spiritual status that is at risk at all times, meaning that they're literally at pikuach nefesh at all times, and many times it's simply because of the wrong ideology. Now the Chazon Ish, alav hashalom, has been helping us build our character by first and foremost educating us about what it is that we're supposed to know. What is the definition of certain things? How do we acquire these character traits that he's talking about? First and foremost, he uncovered for us what emunah really is. Tonight he's going to do a little bit more on that particular aspect of it. Emunah being the fact that we understand that there's HaShkafa pratit, that there is a divine providence, that Hashem is the one that's monitoring everything, unlike some of the heretics of the world that think that God created the world but then went on vacation. This is no different than the Greeks or Pharaoh or other people that understood that there had to be a creator that created the world, but they figured that this creator is too big and majestic for to deal with the lowliness of this world. There's nothing further from the truth than such a statement, simply because if this creator created such a world, it wouldn't make sense for him to walk away, because that would make him a vicious God. And there would be no purpose for the creation if there's no creator monitoring it. But needless to say, when a person understands that Hashem is the one that's watching and monitoring everything that we do, as individuals, as well as a nation, as a species, he also understands that there is a purpose. There is a purpose. And one of the ways that, one of the parts of the purpose is to gain more and more emunah, meaning learn more and more about God to the point of knowledge, where it's no longer just faith in God, but knowledge of God. Then after that, a person has to have the right education to acquire what's called bitachon. And bitachon is simply a clarity that everything that's happening in the world, everything that is obviously done by God, because nothing else is coming from anywhere else, and od milvado, there's nothing else but Him, whether it's good, like you just got the best job, best wife, best husband, best everything in the world that you've always dreamed of, or Hashem Yishmor, it's the worst. The person got sick, there's a national disaster, there's an epidemic, there's a Holocaust, and so on and so forth. En od milvado, there's nothing else but Him, and everything is from Him. And when a person understands that everything is from Him, he also has to understand that since everything is from Him, and He has knowledge beyond any knowledge we could ever attain, and He doesn't think like us, as it is written, He doesn't think like us. My thoughts are not your thoughts, He says to us. So everything that He does is ultimately for the greater good, even if we may not see it. And ultimately what bitachon is a clarity of mind that everything that's happening in your life, whether you understand it or don't understand it, whether you see it or you don't see it, whatever the case may be, everything is ultimately for your own benefit, not just for the greater benefit of the plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but even for your own individualistic perspective, your benefit. And that benefit may come in this world, benefit may come in the eternal world, but nonetheless, having bitachon is a clarity of mind where you know that everything that's happening is for your own good, in so many words. So one of the main things that the Chazon Ish has taught us is that aside from the fact of you needing to work on your character traits in order to acquire this emunah that's going to give you a good understanding of who's running the world, your own personal world and the world around you, and give you this bitachon, the clarity of mind that everything that's happening is for your own benefit. Aside from that, he's telling us that all of these things are impossible to attain in a perfect format without studying the law itself, without studying the Torah itself, and obviously practicing the Torah, not just studying it for academic reasons like some heretics like to do, but rather studying it for the purpose of doing. And when a person studies the Torah, studies the laws, he becomes much more fulfilled with his purpose. Now, how could a person be fulfilled, with learning a bunch of text and applying it to their life? That's part of what we're going to learn, BeEzrat Hashem, tonight, of how this halacha, how studying the laws actually could affect your life, and how actually you already know this, even if you've never studied a single halacha, but you know this to be true, because you actually do it or you've seen it done elsewhere, even if it wasn't from religious people. Now, in last week's shiur, the Chazon Ish told us about there are two types of Torah study. Two types of Torah study. The second part of the Torah study that was referring to is when someone studies the details of the halacha, the details of the laws themselves, why this is the case, who said this, who said that, what did they evaluate in order to get to this conclusion, what did they consider significant, what did they consider insignificant, how come this is even a law in itself, and so on and so forth. The more deeply a person studies the actual law itself, the more he's going to be fulfilling his purpose. But ultimately, this second type of study, this more in-depth type of study, is going to give a person the power to purify their own soul, to refine it, to polish it, and bringing the person an extraordinary feeling, a pleasant feeling of holiness and purity. This is one of the reasons why the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and many other Chachamim that have studied his work has always said that one of the greatest tikkun, really, the greatest tikkun for the biggest sins, whether it be wasting seed or Chilul Shabbat or idol worship or anything else, is always going to be learning Torah, but with toil. Not just learning Torah where you're just sitting back there on your couch and eating popcorn and relaxing, but rather toiling to get to the truth. That's the highest level of tikkun, because that in itself purifies the neshama. Now, of course, there are sometimes people that need a little bit more than just that, because they've done certain things, but nonetheless, this doesn't negate the necessity of learning Torah. Learning Torah will always be the ultimate tikkun for all of the sins. But again, I always emphasize that it's learning Torah for the sake of doing it, not learning Torah for the sake of an academic purpose like many heretics like to do, because their Torah actually goes to the Sitra Acha, goes to the other side, to the side of the Satan, and actually gives him power. People that learn Torah for the sake of destroying it, for the sake of going against it, and things of that nature, are people that are in essence building the power of the Satan himself. But that's for another shiur. Now, the Chazon Ish says that this holiness, this feeling of purity and pleasantness, will ultimately give a person a feeling of disgust towards frivolity and all types of waste of time pleasures. The things of the world that you see, most people are spending their time, what are you doing tonight? Oh, I'm going to watch some basketball. Okay, great, have fun. Oh, are you coming? No, I'm going to go learn Torah. Why? Why would you go learn Torah instead of watching basketball with the guys? Oh, because I like learning Torah. Okay, so learn it tomorrow. No, I want to learn Torah. In reality, if you're learning Torah for the right reason, the real answer is, it's not even that I like to learn Torah, it's that I'm actually disgusted by the fact that you even think that basketball or some party or whatever else of this world is even a competition to learning Torah. So long as in your mind you have something competing with Torah, video games, girls, boys, parties, sports, food, anytime you have something that's still in your mind, like you're debating whether you're going to do this or learn Torah, that means it's an indication for you that you haven't reached this purity. Doesn't make you necessarily the worst person on earth or anything, but nonetheless, that's obviously, it tells you that you haven't gone to this pure form, you haven't gone to where you need to be. Because if you got to where you need to be, everything else in essence becomes disgusting to you. Not a disgusting in a form where you're repelled by the world and you don't want to do anything with anything, but rather that there really isn't anything that will give you as much satisfaction as Torah, to the extent where it's viewed as if it's disgusting. Now, this is one of the things that you see in Talmidei Chachamim, serious Talmidei Chachamim that are pure people. You see that really in their eyes there is nothing else but Torah. Torah for them is life. There is nothing else. There is no other life. There is no other pleasure. And in essence, some of them even get to the point where they do view the world as actually disgusting. But the point being is that to get to that level takes even further than longer than the level that I just spoke about. But the point is that the Chazon Ish is talking about not wasting our time passing pleasures of the world, because the labor of learning Torah results in tremendous love and devotion to the observation of the details of the mitzvah. Meaning that the more a person toils and labors over the details of the laws, the more he is going to enjoy practicing those laws, and the more the inner voice inside you is going to tell you, this is what you were created for. This is what you were created for. Up to this is where we did last week. This week he goes a little further. In the third section, in the third chapter, section 8, he says the following: ואומנם אם עמלה של חקר ההלכה משרשת אהבת הדין באופן מיוחד בהלכה זו שהוא עוסק בה, מוסיפה אהבה כללית לחקר הדין בכל משפטי התורה. כי האמונה בפרטים של המצווה בבחינת רגשי צריכה קניין ואיננה טבעית, והמושכל השטחי מרחיקה. Translation: In truth, if laboring over the clarification of the halakha plants in the heart love of the law, specifically in regards to the halakha that one is dealing with, it also increases a general love of clarifying the rulings in all the laws of the Torah. One of the benefits of specifically toiling over a specific mitzvah, let's say for example, you want to learn more about the details of Shabbat. You want to learn halachot Shabbat. If you're Sfaradi, you're going to go and buy the Yalkut Yosef and the 3 books in English, let's say, or in other languages they have, or in Hebrew, and you're going to go through the Yalkut Yosef, and as your initial learning of the halachot of Shabbat, you're going to go through these 3 books. Once you've gone through these and you've actually gotten yourself well aware with the halachot Shabbat, you want to go even further, then you would go into other Sfarim and so on and so forth. But the point being is, you're going to go through these books and you're going to start learning halachot Shabbat. And one of the great benefits that he's saying you'll get is that by learning halachot Shabbat, not only will you gain more knowledge, but you'll actually gain more pleasure of actually practicing what you've learned. Why? Because you saw it in the book, now you're doing it and it comes to life. The halacha comes to life. Not every halacha comes to life on day one, because not everything is applicable to you. But you're going to learn, and then one day someone's going to ask you, hey, hold on a second, listen, I have a situation here, something happened, the dog jumped on my kid's face, and he bit him, it's Shabbat, what do I do? Can I go to the ambulance? What should I do? Now, if you learn halachot Shabbat, you know that the Torah tells us that if a snake or a dog bites a human being, automatically it's pikuach nefesh. Why? Because there's certain chemicals, certain, you could call it germs, even venom in them that is very dangerous to human beings. It could be a kalevet, the disease that dogs get and bats get and so on, or it could be venomous. Point being is that it's considered pikuach nefesh if a dog bites a human being, even if it's your own family dog, and you have 100% permission from the Torah, and actually obligation from the Torah, to go to the hospital, call the ambulance, get the hospital to come to you, and immediately take you to the emergency room. Now, this is an halakha that most people don't think they'll ever actually have to practice, and hope they never have to practice halakha. But I can tell you, from my own personal experience, it happened to me. It happened to me years ago. We're still living in the mouth of the rat, Boca Raton, and we had my parents as guests for Shabbat. They came from New York. We're having a nice Shabbat dinner. We're still relatively within the first couple of years of being in Florida. Everything was still okay at that time, at least from what I remember. And all of a sudden, somebody's banging on my door. It's 9, 10 o'clock at night. Not exactly expecting guests, but I open the door and I see this guy holding his baby, and the baby's face is covered, and he tells me this whole thing that the dog just flipped out on the kid because the kid was pulling his tail and jumped on his face and bit his face. What should he do? I told him, halakha is you have to call the ambulance right now. He goes, yeah, but what about Shabbat? I said, what Shabbat? You have an obligation to go take your kid to the hospital, and if you don't feel comfortable, I'm going to go in my car and take it. And that's actually what ended up happening. I ended up going in the car and taking them to the hospital, getting the medicine, and so on and so forth. So while everybody else was shocked, what, Yaron, you're driving on Shabbat? I said, it's a mitzvah. Mitzvah to drive on Shabbat. It's pikuach nefesh. Pikuach nefesh. So if you learn the halakha, and you don't necessarily see it in your day-to-day life, and BeEzrat Hashem, you never do see that particular halakha in your life, but other things, you learn, it's mentally stimulating, it's interesting, and so on. But once you start seeing the halachot come to life, because you're practicing these things, all of a sudden you start falling in love with it even more. But what the Chazon Ish is saying further is that not only will you fall in love with the stuff that you're learning, but even more so you'll start falling in love with learning altogether. with learning everything else, because you'll start seeing, as time goes by, you'll start seeing how the things that you're learning are very much and have been and are part of your life. And also, b'siyata dishmaya, Hashem will bring certain things to you as you're learning them. The more siyata dishmaya you have, the more Hashem is going to bring certain things to your hands that have to do with what you're learning. And I've seen it with my own eyes. So the point being is that what the Chazon Ish is saying is that this general love of getting the actual laws themselves is going to only increase as a result of your learning. The emotional identification with the importance of the details of a mitzvah needs to be acquired and is not an intrinsic to human nature. In so many words, what the Chazon Ish is saying here is that anyone that wants to have a connection to Torah has to understand that it is not going to come to you naturally. It's not going to come to you naturally. Why? Even though the Torah, it says, it's in your mouth, it's in your heart to do it. In essence, you were created to follow the Torah. Just like a robot vacuum cleaner was created to be a vacuum cleaner, and just like a door was created in order to be a door that you use for a house or for something else, and just like a car was created in order for someone to drive from point A to point B, you as a human being were created in order to follow the Torah. If you're a Jew, you were created in order to follow all of the mitzvot of the Torah, 613 mitzvot of the Torah, 7 mitzvot of the rabbis, obviously what's applicable to you. By not following a mitzvah that is not applicable to you is in essence following the Torah also. Point being is, you are the perfect species for following all of the mitzvot as a Jew. As a non-Jew, as a Noahide, you also were created as a perfect human being to follow the Noahide laws, unless you choose to want, and you want more, and you want to follow the rest of the Torah, and you want to become a Jew, and therefore you have to convert to Judaism, and which is in essence one of the mitzvot. The point being is that although the Torah says that you were created as the perfect specimen to follow the Torah, learning about the Torah and the details of the law will not come to you naturally. Why? It has to be acquired. What does it mean it has to be acquired? You have to work for it. The emotional connection that your neshama needs in order to connect to the Torah and want it at all times has to come with sweat. It's not going to come to you where you just wake up in the morning and I can't wait to learn Torah. It doesn't work that way. Especially not in the beginning. In fact, in the beginning, for many people, there is a period of time where they can't stand it. They open a book and they don't care for it. They don't like it. They fall asleep. I'll tell you a little secret about me. I like to tell secrets about me because it makes you guys realize that you're not alone. When I first started doing tshuva, my Rav sent me a book. He sent me a book. He wasn't familiar with English books. He doesn't speak a word of English, especially not in the beginning when we first started talking. And he sent me a book, a book that he asked around, verified this is a good book, it's a high-level book, and so on and so forth. And he sent me a book. Now, he sent me this book, and he sent me a letter inside the book. And in the book, he wrote that he toiled very much, very, very much to acquire this book. And I knew that when he said that, he meant every single word of it. Because he didn't have a penny. He wasn't doing well financially. And even more so, he wasn't familiar with the language. And I knew if he went out of his way to go acquire this book and then go figure out how to use a shipping system he never used in his life to ship internationally nonetheless, to go send me a book to the right address. He went through a lot to go get me this book. He said, please read it. That's the only request that he had. Now I wanted to read this book because I was really interested in learning Torah. I was interested. But I tell you a secret, I couldn't stand this book. I couldn't stand it. It seemed to me like watching paint dry. It seemed to me like it was something out of a different world, like it had nothing to do with my life. Because every time I would open the book, I would fall asleep in literally a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Sometimes I'd survive 5 minutes. And it was the hardest thing in the world because I read a lot of books. My house was full of different books that I read about the economy and the markets and hedge funds and all types of mumbo jumbo that I thought was important before I learned Torah. And all of a sudden he gives me a book that has answers to the questions that I need, but I'm not getting there. And it was really, really difficult. And every day I would try and it would never work. And I would try on Shabbat and it just wouldn't work. And I would fall asleep and then wake up and fall asleep and wake up. And it was the hardest thing in the world. But over time, that klipa that I had on me, little by little broke. And I was able to get more and more. And little by little get to learn more and more. The point being is that in the beginning, there is no guarantee whatsoever that you're going to just open the Chumash, open the Gemara, open some Sefer Tzadikim, open the Mesilat Yesharim or any book whatsoever and fall in love with it and just sit there for hours upon hours and become the next Rav Kanievsky Shlita. Not going to happen. Why? The klipa that you have on your neshama as a result of your sins will simply not allow it to happen. So in order to get to that point, you have to be ready to acquire it. You have to fight. You have to do everything you can to stay awake. You have to do everything you can to stay focused. You have to do everything you can to eliminate all distractions. You have to do everything you can to take everything seriously and to do everything you can to remember the things that you're reading. And it's not easy. Many times people see the rabbis speak, especially people that are Talmidei Chachamim, know a lot of things by heart, know answers for every question, and so on. They think it came easy to them. One of the most well-known Talmidei Chachamim in the Jewish world today is Rav Meir Eliyahu. Rav Meir Eliyahu is something out of this world. We call him, like between us, a computer. Like he's faster than a computer with you. You ask him a question, before you finish the question, he has 87 different sources giving you an answer. It's something out of this world. He's really, truly a tzaddik also, aside from being a genius. But once in a blue moon, he would say a story about his life and what the things he went through in order to get there. And those are some of my favorite stories because when you see what kind of nightmare he went through willingly, in order to acquire Torah, you say, you know what? Magia lo. He deserves it. He deserves the whole Torah on a silver platter, what he went through. Literally, starvation, sleeping in bathrooms, not having a place to live, all types of things. Why? Wants to learn Torah. Wants to learn Torah and didn't care about anything else. And coming into the Torah world as a Baal Tshuva in his, 20s or something like that, no one really had any high expectations for this fella. No one had any high expectations. Why? He didn't learn Torah his whole life. He lived a secular life. What could you possibly expect? The guy, as Baruch Hashem, in the last 20 plus years, has become a genius. And that is, BeEzrat Hashem, on his way to becoming one of the Gdolei Ador. And the funny thing is that while some people foolishly think, oh yeah, he's like Rav Ovadia already. Someone said this to him one time, and because obviously, Baruch Hashem, he understands who the real Chachamim are, who the Gdolei Ador are, he said, me, Rav Ovadia, I wish I would be a grain of sand under his feet. Now if you hear one of his lectures, you're like, what do you mean? He's already Rav Ovadia, he's already this. But someone that has learned Rav Ovadia's psaks, someone that learned Rav Ovadia's Yabia Omer, and the rest of the Sfarim that he has, knows who and who is who. Point being is, as much of a genius as he is, he even says himself, I'm not even a grain of sand under Rav Ovadia's. Point being is, he was willing to sacrifice and did sacrifice his life to become what he is today and continue to grow Baruch Hashem. Every shiur that he does, and whenever I get a chance to hear any of his shiurim, Baruch Hashem, full of chidushim, never goes over the same thing twice. Same thing you see, Rav Ovadia, previous generation. It was literally, they didn't have bedrooms. When he first got married with the Rabbanit, he had a meeting one time in his house with another Talmid Chacham, and Talmid Chacham didn't see any bedrooms, didn't see any bathrooms. It was just the whole house was just one room, not even a studio, just one room. He didn't know where everybody was. He figured, they're talking Torah for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Then all of a sudden he hears a baby, but doesn't know where it's coming from, only to realize that the Rabbanit and the babies are under the table waiting for them to finish their Torah conversation. That's the sacrifice that Rav Ovadia made and many, many other things. The point being is that all of the Chachamim didn't get to become huge Chachamim just because they had a good memory or because they liked to read books. When it comes to the Torah, if you want it, you have to acquire it. You have to toil for it. You have to sacrifice your life for it. You have to do things that are, in essence, something that's beyond the norm, beyond what people think is normal. And that's, in essence, one of the things that the Chazon Ish is trying to tell us here is that enjoying this learning to the point where you have an emotional connection to the Torah is not going to come to you naturally. It's not going to come to you naturally. You have to acquire it. Once you acquire it, then all you want is Torah. Once you acquire it, all you want is Torah, because you understand that this is the honey of the world. This is the oxygen of the world. This is all you really need in the world. Furthermore, he continues, where he says, in fact, superficial thinking rejects it. For instance, when one is required to believe that shaking out a garment on Shabbat requires one to bring a sin offering, whereas chopping wood is only prohibited by rabbinical decree, or to believe that dishes sold to a non-Jew on Erev Shabbat have to be immersed in a mikveh after Pesach, it's even harder to believe that the laws pertaining to monetary matters when one is embroiled in a dispute with a fellow Jew. So he says that all of these laws, when it's basic things practical to your day-to-day life, or if it's, for example, something that's not necessarily forcing you to change your life, those are not so difficult to accept, especially if it's not relevant to you. To learn, let's say, the halachot that have to do with Kohanim. Everybody likes to do it as long as they're not a Kohen. But as soon as you tell the Kohen that he's not allowed to marry a widow, a divorcee, a convert, all of a sudden he has a problem. Same thing with converts. You tell them, listen, you have to do this. They love all the laws. As soon as you tell them you're not allowed to marry a Kohen, all of a sudden they have a question of whether they should convert or not. And the same thing goes with everybody, is that as long as it doesn't really affect your life, people like to learn it. But as soon as it is applicable to your life, people start saying, are you sure? Can I get a double check? Can maybe you ask your rabbi? Can maybe you get a different psak? This, that. How come? Because they haven't acquired Torah yet, and they haven't really identified with the Torah. They're still looking for the Torah to make sense to them. They're still looking for the Torah to make sense to them. And Chazon Ish says, is that so long as you are trying to make sense of it, where you're looking at the Torah in a superficial way, where it has to agree with your common sense, with your rationale will ultimately reject the Torah. Those rationalists end up becoming the biggest heretics in the Torah because of this very same reason. The more rational you're looking for the Torah to be, the more you're looking for it to be rational based on your rationale, and in essence to agree with you. And the more you look for to the Torah to agree with you, the more the Torah disagrees with you. The more it rejects you. Why? Because you haven't submitted to the Torah. You haven't submitted to the Torah, and as long as a person has not submitted to the Torah, he cannot acquire it. And little by little, this could become one straight road to Gehinnom. So when a person tries to make sense of certain things, the Chazon Ish brings up a couple of different things that simply don't make sense, that rational sense to certain people. You can say, well, how come someone that shakes out his garment on Shabbat has to bring a korban chatat, but someone that chopped wood seems like a much worse violation. No, it's a rabbinical sin. That's a rabbinical sin. To a rational mind, doesn't make any sense. But who says it's supposed to make sense? On the other hand, you're allowed to go give a goy your utensils, your dishes to a non-Jew on Erev Shabbat. But after Erev Shabbat, you have to tovel them. After you've already used them. What do you mean? Why? What's going on? Why am I allowed to give it to him and now I have to? Doesn't make any sense. So long as you're looking for the Torah to make sense to you and everything, you're going to never acquire it. Never acquire it. This is one of the things that people that are looking for superficial pleasures, typically you tell them, listen, everything that you're forbidden from doing, the Torah is not looking to give you a tough life. Everything that's forbidden, there is a permission to do it in a permissible way. But it's not because the Torah is trying to make sense to you That's not the reason, but rather because Hashem is trying to show you that you're not going to miss anything as a result of following the Torah. For example, if you look at the Gemara Masechet Chulin, page 109, Torah says that everything that Torah is forbidden, Hashem gave us a way to do it. So for example, if he says that for blood, we're not allowed to eat blood. But because we're not allowed to eat blood, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says you are allowed to eat liver. If you cook the liver, you're allowed to eat liver. Liver, by default, has some blood in it. It's absolutely impossible to remove all of the blood from the liver. But of course, you have to cook it in a certain way. You have to open up the arteries to make sure that everything is cooked and you're not mamash eating the blood in itself as it was when it was still inside the animal. But nonetheless, there's still going to be blood. You're allowed. But if it's blood in your steak, you have a very serious problem. It wasn't salted right enough. You have a kashrut problem. On the other hand, Torah told us that we're not allowed to be with a nidah. Our own wife, when she's nidah, she has a menstrual cycle and she's still counting the days before she goes to the mikveh. You're not even allowed to hold her hand. Not allowed that pleasure of being with the nidah, whatever pleasure that is that exists in the world, not allowed to have that pleasure, but you're allowed to have the pleasure of being with your wife for the first time when she's betula, she is a virgin, and therefore there's a certain pleasure apparently from that as well. So that blood is allowed, whereas the blood of a nidah is not allowed. Another example the Gemara gives is you're not allowed to eat the pig. We're not allowed to eat pigs. We're not allowed to eat bacon or ham or any of that those animals. But you're allowed to eat the brain of a fish called shibuta. It has apparently the same taste as a pig. There's also a certain duck in Japan apparently that also has the same taste as bacon. Also, you're not allowed to be with your brother's wife. You're not allowed to marry your brother's wife, but you are allowed to be with a yevama. If a person has a brother that died childless, you're allowed to marry his wife for the sake of yibum. Also, not allowed to be with Torah forbids for a person to be with a married woman, but in order to show that the Torah is not looking to just give you a tough life and say not allowed to do anything, you are allowed to marry, as long as you're not a Kohen, you are allowed to marry a divorced woman even if her ex-husband is still alive. You don't have to wait for him to die or anything. And then one of the Chachamim says, okay, so Rabbi Nachman, you're saying to us that there's all types of things that we're allowed to do. What about milk and meat? What if I want to have milk and meat? Is there a way to have milk and meat? He says, yeah. In those days, he said, listen, you can take the udders of the behemah and you can cook them, and it's still going to have, since it had milk in it, you'll have still the taste of milk and meat. And it's kosher. It's 100% kosher. You're not allowed to have milk and meat together, but the udders that had the milk in them, obviously you're not cooking them with the milk. It's just that it's in it for so long that it has a certain taste that is like having milk and meat. The point being is that the Torah is, on one end, trying to show us that it's not just about telling people everything is forbidden. Any idiot can tell you everything is forbidden. Okay? That's not what the Torah is trying to tell you. The Torah is trying to tell you is that there are things that are forbidden because that's what Hashem says no to, but that doesn't mean that He doesn't want you to have pleasure. You could have pleasure, even the same pleasure, just in a permissible way. In essence, what Hashem is requesting from us is to control ourselves and not to be so animalistic. That's in essence what Hashem is trying to do. But if we are going to try to make sense of it, we're going to say, wait, listen, this makes sense to me, great, so that's why I'm going to follow the Torah. It's only a matter of time before you desecrate the Torah for that very same reason. Why? Because if you're constantly going to look for the Torah to make sense to you, the day will come where it will not make sense to you. And what will you do then? What will you do during those times? So it's very important to know that in order for the Torah to become pleasant to you, you have to acquire it, but not because it all makes sense to you, but rather because you enjoy the toiling to identify the truth of the law itself, the details of the law. Now, when it comes to certain things like monetary laws, this is one of the main places where people go in a completely left, awful direction. awful direction, where the Chazon Ish says it's even harder to believe in the laws when it comes to monetary matters, because when you have a dispute between yourself and another fellow Jew, the entire army of your character traits is then activated against your rival, and one is incapable of seeing himself as blameworthy. His evil inclination triumphs, making a person lean in many different directions, blinding him, sealing his ears, and smoothing out all issues in his own favor. In such a situation, only if one has already spent days and nights clarifying the laws, studying the books of the commentaries and the halachic authorities who have shown us the way of the oral Torah and have elaborated on it endlessly, will one be able to subjugate his heart to the law and acknowledged laws that cause a person a loss. This labor will serve as a shield against the competition between human beings, against the love of larceny. It will provide the laborer with love of law and justice, dearer than any material assets or money. In so many words, the Chazon Ish is trying to tell us, if you're always going to look for the Torah to make sense to you, to be pleasing to you, to be fun to learn, to be mentally stimulating, it's only a matter of time before the Satan will have your head. Why? Because you're not toiling enough to acquire the Torah for what it is. The Torah is the oxygen that runs the whole world. If you view it as something just for mental stimulation, pleasantries, rewards, and things of that nature, it's only a matter of time before there isn't any pleasantries that you're getting from it. It's not making sense to you for an extended period of time, and little by little, you're going to start looking for those for a replacement. So a person needs to know that one of the places that the Satan puts a person to the test is when it comes to monetary issues. She was your best friend until you guys did a deal together and you worked harder on the house than she did, but she still wants half the money. He built the company, came up with the idea, but you invested the money and you think you deserve more than 50%. And so on and so forth. Monetary matters are what creates a whole line of Gehenom in the world, because people take the Torah that they learned and throw it in the garbage. Why? Their emotions. Their emotions take precedent over the Torah itself. And that means that they've never acquired the Torah in the first place. They've never acquired the Torah in the first place. If a person wants to be a Chacham, the Chachamim say, learn the Gemara, Bava Metzia, Bava Kama, Bava Batra. These three Gemarot tell you about the monetary laws, and you'll become a Chacham. But you shouldn't start your learning of Gemara with those Gemarot though. Why? Because you first need to learn how to learn before you actually learn. So you have to start traditionally with Masechet Brachot and some of the small tractates to learn how to learn before you graduate and eventually get to those Gemarot. Point being is, you have to acquire Torah before you learn Torah, especially the more difficult subjects. But if you're constantly looking for the Torah on a superficial level because you like it, you enjoy the way this guy speaks, you enjoy the way this place is having a shiur, maybe the food is good too, maybe the people that you're meeting there are nice too, perhaps you got a client or two, and all of those different superficial reasons, it's only a matter of time before the Satan himself will have you hanging on one of his shelves. Why? You viewed the Torah from the wrong perspective. You view the Torah from the wrong perspective. You're looking for it to be another pleasantry of the world. And it's not a pleasantry of the world. It is the world. It is the oxygen that runs the world. And that's one of the things that we'll try to uncover from one of the Chachamim, Rav Palaji, alav hashalom, who talked about it extensively in his halachot and said some very scary things. Not scary in a sense of Gehenom, Kafakela, and so on, even though he does mention that, but rather scary in a perspective of how far we are from the mentality we need to be as a people and as individuals, as a group as well. But here the Chazon Ish is trying to tell us that if a person has an argument, a monetary issue with somebody else, unless he has already perfected himself by toiling over Torah, by slaving over it, by going into the deepest part of the law and submitting to it, he's simply going to fail that test. Why? His emotions will be much more important to him than what the Torah says. Why? Because at some point, the Torah is not going to make sense to him. There was a story one time with Rabbi Yonatan Eibishitz, where two people came to Rabbi Yonatan Eibishitz, alav shalom, and they had a argument, monetary argument, about, let's call it $10,000. And Rabbi Yonatan Eibishitz reviewed the disagreement and said, okay, you have to pay him the $10,000. So, of course, the losing party did not like what he had heard and started screaming at the rabbi, no, this must be a mistake, the rabbi didn't review it right, this, that, the other thing. And Rabbi Yonatan Eibishitz was surprised at this man and said to him, I don't understand. Just the other day you came to me and I told you that a entire fleet of cattle that was slaughtered for you was all tarif, and you had to lose 10 times the amount, and you accepted the halacha with no problem. Now I'm telling you about 10% of the amount, and you have a problem? He says, yeah, Kvod Harav, it's completely different. That halacha that you told me with 10 times the amount, $100,000, that's kapara. What can I do? It's kapara. You know, there was a loss happens. But here, you're telling me I have to give the money to him. I can't accept that. Meaning that it has nothing to do with the Torah. It has to do what makes sense to him. It's all emotions, ego, and so on and so forth. This happens a lot to people. And the primary reason for it is because they haven't acquired the Torah. Now, to acquire the Torah, a person needs to know what's required. What's required? Because you have sometimes people that do study the Torah, but are still heretics, are still people that are looking to study the Torah in order to insult it, in order to diminish it, in order to go against it, like some of these missionaries, Imach Shimam v'Zichram, or these heretics, and so on and so forth. So, the Gemara in Masechet Brachot, page 33b, brings a pasuk from the book of Isaiah, chapter 33, verse 6, where the prophet Isaiah says to the people different traits that we must have in order for us to be on the good side of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for that big day when it comes, but even more so for day to day. Where he tells us the faith of your times will be the strength of your salvation, wisdom, knowledge, and then he completes the verse with four simple words that tell us everything. Yirat Adonai iyotzaru. The fear of the Almighty, that's his treasure. So the Gemara says, look at this verse. The Torah is specifically telling us that if you look into the treasure chest, if you will, that belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what will you find? You'll find the Yirat Shamayim, the fear of him that people have, that is tzaddikim have in the world. That's what you'll find. What else will you find? Nothing else. There used to be something else, but now that's all you have. How do we know there used to be something else? Because the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, page 10b, and also Masechet BeIt, page 16b, and a few other places, says a dialogue between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu. Where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, before we arrived at Mount Sinai, before we got the Torah, and he tells Moshe Rabbeinu, I have a big precious gift in my treasure chest. Go tell Am Yisrael that I'm going to give it to them. The name of this present, the name of this gift that I have, this treasure that I have in my treasure chest is called Shabbat. And I'm going to give it to them. Go tell them. So which means that initially, Hashem had two things in his treasure chest. He had Shabbat and he had Yirat Shamayim. After he gave Am Yisrael Shabbat, if you will, the only thing that's left is Yirat Shamayim. He doesn't have Ahavat Hashem, loving of Hashem, in that treasure chest. Doesn't exist. He doesn't have Emunah and Bitachon in that treasure chest. No. He doesn't have all of the things that you would think he would have. What does he have? The Yirat Shamayim. The people that have shown that they have fear of Hashem at different moments of their life, he takes that, packages it, puts it in his treasure. That other guy showed Yirat Shamayim, he didn't look at that girl, took that Yirat Shamayim that he showed, puts it in a package, puts it in his treasure chest. That other guy was able to steal, but he didn't steal because he's afraid of Hashem. Hashem took that Yirat Shamayim, put it in a package, puts it in his treasure chest. That girl was going to put on an immodest dress. She chose not to because she doesn't want to desecrate Hashem's name. She doesn't want to be considered a zonah in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. She wants to be a Bat Yisrael. She wants to be a tzadikah. Doesn't do it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes that Yirat Shamayim, puts it in the treasure chest. And on and on and on. All of the different reasons of why people show, all of the different ways that people show their Yirat Shamayim, Hashem takes those moments and puts it in his treasure chest. That's what he has. Now, for this, the Gemara says, Yirat Hashem iotzaro. That Yirat Hashem, that is the treasure chest now. That's the treasure chest that he has. All he has is this treasure. Now, what is this like? Rabbi Reuven brings a example, a parable, if you will. If, let's say, life turned into a video game, and people had to go acquire something for the world to exist. Like you would, in the video games, you have to, some people, these games, you have to acquire a plant, or you have to acquire stars, or coins, or something. So what would real people have to acquire? Not food, not water, not money for sure, not intimacy, none of the funds of the world. What would they have to acquire? First priority, in order for the world to exist, oxygen, air. Air for us to breathe. If we were all a video game, we had to acquire something in order for the world to exist, or else we're all going to simply die. What do we acquire? We acquire oxygen. Yirat Shamayim. That's the oxygen of the world. That's the oxygen of the world. Without this Yirat Shamayim, without this fear of the Almighty, there is no world. Which means that the few among us that have real Yirat Shamayim at different moments of our life, some more, some less, some here, some there, some in the past life, some during this life, that's in essence the oxygen of the world. Now, we see that this is not a new thing, but rather this is something that's always been, it's mentioned in the Torah. In the book of Genesis, chapter 20, verse 11, Avraham meets Avimelech. And Avimelech is rebuking Avraham. Why didn't you tell us that your wife is your wife? Why did you in fact tell us that she's your sister? And Avraham, without skipping a beat, tells him, I saw that there's no fear of the Almighty here, and they would kill me over my wife. En yirat Hashem b'makom hazeh v'yarguni al dvar ishti. I saw that there's no fear of the Almighty here, which meant that they would kill me over my wife. Meaning that Avraham Avinu broke down the consequence of not having this oxygen called Yirat Shamayim. This oxygen called fear of the Almighty. That due to the fact that there is no fear of the Almighty in this place, my life was in constant danger. It was a pikuach nefesh, a life danger situation, which meant that I was allowed to lie. I was allowed to do whatever I needed to in order to save my life. Because surely a place that has no fear of the Almighty will surely resort to murder. Meaning, Rabotai Yekarim, that when there is no Yirat Shamayim, It's an automatic status of pikuach nefesh. Hence the reason why the Gemara says in Masechet Pesachim that a person should not be in a closed room with a person that does not have Yirat Shamayim because he may kill him. Shene'emar that En Yirat Hashem b'makom hazeh v'yarguni al dvar ishti. That the Gemara uses the Avraham Avinu as the source, that a place that does not have Yirat Shamayim for sure will resort to dangerous things such as murder. So here we see, Rabotai, that Yirat Shamayim is the oxygen. But what does it have to do with everything that we've learned so far? We go to Rabbi Chaim Palaji. Rabbi Chaim Palaji, about 200 years ago, in his responsa, sefer called Lev Chaim, he says a few really extraordinary things that a person that understands it, praiseworthy is the person that understands it. He says, Shlomo HaMelech, Chacham Mikol Adam, the wisest man of all, mentions Yirat Shamayim, Yirat Hashem, the fear of the Almighty, 18 times in his book of Proverbs. 18 times, for those who know, 18 in the Hebrew words, the Hebrew letters are also numbers. So 18 in letters is Yud Chet, which spells the word Chai, to live, alive. So Rabbi Chaim Palaji says that from here we learn that one who has fear of the Almighty has life. And one who has less Yirat Shamayim, he has less life, to the extent where, just like the sages told us in the Gemara Masechet Brachot, page 18b, also again, incidentally, but not incidentally, all b'siyata dishmaya, Masechet Brachot, page 18, also the Chai again, 18b, says that the wicked people are considered dead even during their life. Meaning that they're alive, but they don't have a life. They don't have the Chai. Implying that one is in constant danger of dying at any given moment because of his spiritual deformity. And Rabbi Chaim Palaji says here is that the Kabbalists teach us that each time a person sins with a different body part, that body part becomes deformed and in essence missing from the neshama, from the spiritual self. So a person that's constantly thinking about filthy things, his neshama, when it goes up to Shamayim, is missing a head. If he is constantly sinning with his right hand, in Shamayim, he's missing a hand. If he's sinning with his legs, he's constantly missing legs when he goes up to Shamayim. His neshama is missing these, it's deformed. Shows up to Shamayim, deformed, completely deformed. So here we see, Rabotai, that the mentioning of 18 times of the word Chai, of the word Yirat Shamayim, in the Proverbs was not incidental, but rather purposeful, because it spells the word Chai, which in essence is means life, which is what Yirat Shamayim is. On the other hand, in Masechet Brachot, it's the whole topic of the wicked people being called dead because of their wickedness. That's page 18. 18 is Yud Chet. Yud Chet is Chai, opposite. Yud Chet is I, opposite, meaning that they're obviously opposite of being alive. But that was my own chidush on it. But most importantly is the chidush of the giant Rabbi Chaim Palaji, is that there's a reason why the Torah is mentioning, why the Shlomo HaMelech is mentioning Yirat Shamayim so much. Because that Yirat Shamayim, that's the life of a person. The more Yirat Shamayim a person has, the more spiritually healthy they are. The less Yirat Shamayim they have, the more spiritually sick they are. which in essence mean when a person gets to a point where they are just simply sinning on a regular basis, where they're exerting no yirat shamayim whatsoever, or almost barely any, they have no limitations, they make every sin under the sun, the Gemara calls that person a wicked person that's considered dead even while he's alive. Even while he's alive. So now, if we look at the Zohar Kadosh calls matzah that we're going to eat BeEzrat HaShem on Pesach, lechem ha'emunah, the bread of faith. The bread of faith. Why? Because Am Yisrael showed a lot of faith in Hashem, a lot of emunah in Hashem, that He's the one that's running the world, and that He's going to take care of them, and a lot of faith in Hashem that they just simply left Egypt, as miserable as it was. At least they knew where they're going to be the next day. But there they went into the desert, which people that went into the desert usually didn't come back. They had faith in Hashem, and trusting Him, and going into the desert, and to this day, Kadosh Baruch Hu is rewarding Am Yisrael for having faith in Him, and following Him into the desert. So, the matzah, the Zohar calls it, lechem emunah, the bread of faith. Now, Rav Tzion Abba Shaul, alav shalom, he was the chavruta, and also Gdol Ador of the previous generation, the chavruta of Rav Ovadia. From childhood, they used to learn Torah together on the way to YESHIVA every single day, where they didn't have enough money for both of them to be on the bus, so they both would take the bus on the way to YESHIVA, but on the way home, they would both walk. Instead of one walk both ways and one be on a bus both ways, they were so close, they made sure that they go on a bus together on the way there, and walk home a long way together, and learn Torah the whole time, and remember the entire Gemara by heart. And Rav Tzion Abba Shaul says we both remember the entire Gemara by heart and what we learned, and the page that we looked at right before we left. Only difference is that Rav Ovadia also remembered the name specifically. That's it. But you see these giants, these Torah giants. Now, Rav Tzion Abba Shaul had an extraordinary chidush. A chidush that, if you put it into perspective, is extremely applicable to the times we are in now. Why? He says, this lechem emunah, this bread of faith, it's fanatic. This matzah is a fanatic. It's not like meat. Matzah is much more fanatic than meat. What does that mean? Meat, chicken, poultry, there are different levels of kashrut. There's different levels of kashrut. Meaning that sometimes there's a behemah, there's an animal, and there is a clear, this is halak, this is good, whatever, it's kashrut, best kashrut, right? That's what we'd all hope for. In reality, it doesn't really work that way. Why? You open up the animal, sometimes there's something that kind of looks like a hole in a lung. If it's a hole, tarif. If it's not a hole, it's allowed. So you have to bring a chacham. So sometimes you have certain questions about an animal. If kashrut, is it kasher, is it tarif? And there's different levels. It's definitely not 100%, it's definitely not this, it's definitely... So there's different levels. He says with matzah, this lechem emunah, it's not like that. He says matzah, Rav Tzion Abba Shaul says, matzah is fanatic, it's kitzoni. It's either 100% meudar, highest level of kashrut, or 100% chametz. Again, the matzah that you're all about to eat in Pesach is either 100% meudar, the best kashrut, the best of the best, or it's 100% chametz. Meaning that when you're going to bite that matzah, you better make sure you've done every check you possibly could of where'd you get this matzah. You didn't just buy something because it was sold at a dollar store. You bought it because it has kashrut, reliable, you know what you're doing, they know what they're doing. You're relying on somebody, not just yourself and the price and what fits your budget. Why? Because that matzah, if it's not 100% meudar, it's chametz. And chametz, rabotai, is karet. Karet. So here we see, rabotai, something that gives us a little bit more of a perspective of where Yirat Shamayim is most applicable. Because there are certain things that you can find a leniency, you can find a different psak, you can find this, you can find that, but there are certain things you can't find nothing. It's black or white. It's kasher or it's chametz. One of those things is matzah. But another one of those is emunah. Either you have emunah or you don't have emunah. Now, of course, there's levels of emunah. But where does this emunah come from? The emunah, Rabotai Karim, comes from Yirat Shamayim. How do we know that? How do we know that emunah begins with Yirat Shamayim, begins with fear of the Almighty? We have a pasuk in the Torah. Torah Kedusha tells us in Parashat Beshalach, in chapter 14, verse number 31, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us a roadmap of how to acquire emunah. וירא ישראל את היד הגדולה אשר עשה אדוני במצרים, ויראו העם את אדוני, ויאמינו באדוני ובמשה עבדו. Israel saw the great hand that Hashem inflicted upon Egypt, and the people revered Hashem, and they had emunah in Hashem and in Moshe his servant. Here the Torah tells us that to acquire emunah is a multi-step process. You cannot just go from zero to having emunah in Hashem. Why? Because first you have to know that Hashem exists, and He is the one that's running the world. Just like Am Yisrael first saw the great hand of Hashem. You didn't see a physical hand, but they saw Hashem's actions, what He did to the Egyptians, not only the 10 plagues, but how He split the ocean to 12, how He allowed them to pass freely, in a pleasurable way, fruits, vegetables coming out of the ground, flat ground, everything's a tunnel. The water that was salty 2 seconds ago is now pure for them to drink. Everything is amazing, magical. They see the heavens open, and everyone is saying, Zeh li ve'anveu, this is God, and I will sanctify Him. Even babies that were inside the stomachs were pointing at Shamayim, saying, Zeh li ve'anveu, this is God, and I will sanctify Him. Everyone is seeing this. This is God. And then they see the Egyptians. They were chasing them. Everybody's dead. Vayar Yisrael et hayad hagdolah. Am Yisrael finally got the point. It's not that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, natural disaster, happenstance, possibly bad winter, bad summer. No, it's Hashem's hand specifically dictating what's going to be in the world. Specifically monitoring who's going to survive. Specifically doing certain things and playing with this world like Play-Doh. They see He is the Yad HaGdolah. He is the great hand that destroyed Egypt. Not a wind, not a tsunami, not a happenstance of any kind, but it's His hand. And immediately it says, Vayir'u ha'am. Immediately all got scared. They weren't scared in Egypt. They weren't scared when the plagues were happening. They weren't scared when they were crossing the ocean. When they get scared? After they saw what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did to the Egyptians. Because then and only then did they realize this could only be something from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It cannot be from anybody else. This could only be from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now you could ask 1.5 million questions. How could they not know from before, from this, from that? Well, in reality, you're asking the questions about yourself. How could you not know from this, from that, from that? Because you all lived at that time. You were them. We were them. And we messed up, and that's why we're here still today. But that's a topic for a different day. The point being is that Am Yisrael finally saw the hand that runs the world, the hand that brought Corona, the hand that brought financial crisis, the hand that brought all types of crises that we all have individually and as a nation. They saw the hand and immediately they got scared. And only after they got scared of Hashem and they revered Him, does it say, V'yaminu ba'Adonai u'b'Moshe avdo. Then they believed in Hashem, they had emunah in Hashem and in Moses the servant. Only once they had fear in Hashem did they have emunah in Hashem. And only once they had emunah in Hashem were they willing to listen to the rabbis like Moshe Rabbeinu and his followers. Because without Yirat Shamayim, Rabotai Yekarim, you do not believe in God. That's the key. That's the key lesson that we learn here. Many times people say, I believe in God, I'm just not religious. No, Habibi, you don't believe in God. You believe in an idol. Why? Because if you believe in a God where that God allows you to do whatever you want, that's not the God of Israel. That's a God that you made up. If you believe in a God that allows you to walk around immodestly and be promiscuous and do whatever you want in business and cheat and gamble and lie and do whatever you want, that's not the God of Israel. You, my friend, are an idol worshiper. That's the truth. Why? Because when Am Yisrael saw the Yad HaGdolah, saw the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, immediately they got scared. And what does it mean they got scared? They got scared. They accepted anything and everything that he wants. Why? We have emunah that he is the one that's running the world. Tell us, Rabbi, what do you want us to do? What did he say for us to do? Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and then we'll listen. This is why, Rabotai Yekarim, this is why right after Am Yisrael crossed the ocean, saw the Egyptians get completely annihilated, they acquired fear of the Almighty. They acquired emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They were willing and happy to follow Moshe Rabbeinu and his words. This is why they started singing where it says, Az Yashir Moshe. Oh, then Moshe Rabbeinu started singing with them. And everyone said and pointed to the sky, Ze li ve'anveu. This is my God and I will sanctify him. How will you sanctify him if you don't have emunah? How will you sanctify him if you don't have Yirat Shamayim? How will you sanctify him if you don't keep Shabbat? How will you sanctify him if you continue to waste seed and be immodest and immoral and so on? Obviously, you cannot sanctify him that way. In order to sanctify him, you have to, first and foremost, have to have Yirat Shamayim. This, Rabotai Yekarim, is the ultimate lesson that a person needs to know completely in order to acquire Torah. Because without this, Rabotai, they don't believe in the God of Israel. They believe in their own made-up God. And unfortunately, sometimes people will mention a verse in the prophets, in the writings, and misunderstand it by Habakkuk. Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse number 4, says, Tzaddik be'emunato yichyeh. Tzaddik, a righteous person, will live with his emunah, and many clueless people mistranslate this pasuk or even say ish be'emunato yichyeh, that a person will live with his own emunah. You live with your emunah, I live with one emunah, but it doesn't say ish be'emunato. It says tzaddik be'emunato. A righteous person will live with his emunah. Chachamim say, what is this emunah? This emunah is referring to Yirat Shamayim. Why? He will live because of his emunah. What is this emunah? The oxygen of the world called Yirat Shamayim. That's what it is. That emunah that Habakkuk is referring to is Yirat Shamayim, is fear of the Almighty. But unfortunately, if a person doesn't listen to what the Chachamim say, they'll constantly fall for the trap. And just like the Gaon Vilna said, the trap of the last generation is money. That's the golden calf of the generation. So many times you'll see somebody learn Torah, do mitzvot, do a lot of different things, but still fall for the trap and desecrate the Torah in the name of the Torah. Some of the places that you see this most often is, as the Chazon Ish said, it's when it comes to money issues, but it comes to traits of a person, greed or stinginess and so on. So a person, for example, decides that he's going to take a few extra dollars from the partnership. He has a partnership. He takes a few extra dollars. He makes himself feel at home. You ask the guy, listen, does your partner know about you taking this money? Listen, he took also. He take, I took, everybody took. Or better yet, somebody works for a company and he decides to take a little bit of extra petty cash, decides to take a little bit of extra stuff from the office, decides to take a little bit of an extra time for lunch, decides to take an extra expenses, this, that, spends the company's money. No, how do you explain this, Mr. Religious? Wow, you see how I work so hard? Well, you don't see, I work a lot harder than what they're paying me for. That's why it's okay for me to take. And they rationalize. They rationalize by simply taking the Torah, throwing it in the garbage, and putting their own common sense instead. This happens, Rabotai, many, many times, and unfortunately even happens in kosher places, or places that are supposed to be and give the impression that they're kosher, because they have to do with Torah and they have to do with donations. Where sometimes you're going to see somebody come to a place and want to donate money, and really the people that are about to receive the money, either it's a Beit Knesset, a synagogue, or it's a YESHIVA, or it's something like that, or a Torah organization, they know who this person is. Not like they don't know who this person is. They know that this person is a Mechalel Shabbat. They know that this person made the money dafka on Shabbat, or he made it gambling, or he made it in some other non-kosher way like cash advance business. But he comes with, his big checkbook. He says, listen, what campaign do you have? I'm about to write you 150,000 now. Or what do you have? What, $1 million? Okay, I can do $1 million. I can do what? You need $1 million? No, I can do $1 million. I can do $1 million. What do you have? What do you have? And they know it's not kosher money. And they come to not kosher money. Well, come to the rabbi. Rabbi, listen, this guy, he's about to donate $1 million, but he wants the name of the place. He wants the campaign with his name on it. Wait, that guy, the murderer, the rapist, the pedophile, the guy that owns a few casinos, the guy that's this and that Rasha, that's on the news. Yeah, Rabbi, I didn't know that you heard of him. Yeah, don't take his money. No, but Rabbi, he wants to give $1 million to our yeshiva, to our this, to our project, to our shul. That's when you see people's Yirat Shamayim. If they have Yirat Shamayim, Rabotai Yekarim, that's not money that they want. And it's not money they're going to accept. Why? It's not kosher money. Now, if they don't have Yirat Shamayim, they're going to find and look for and find every single kula, every single leniency under the planet, under the sun, to justify taking the money. Why? This place has no Yirat Shamayim, v'yarguni al dvar ishti. Now, there was one time a guy, Reform, he learned in the Reform, from his Reform non-Jewish rabbis, there was really a woman, that when your dog reaches 13, you should give him a bar mitzvah. This, Hashem Yishmo, is what the Reform people teach their people. And now, these Reform leaders, Yimach Shimam v'Zichram, they've ruined American Judaism, so now they want to move to Israel. And they got the lefty, liberal Israeli government to approve them, and approve their fake conversions. And in reality, they're simply trying to destroy Israel just like they destroyed America. So these Reform rabbis and heretics and apikolsim and every single curse under the sun from the Torah, these people, they make a mockery of the Torah, which makes it a mitzvah to make fun of them. Now, do I know some people that used to be Reform and now are really nice people? Absolutely. I have several students like that. They used to be Reformed, now it's tzaddikim and tzaddikot. But does that mean that they were just as good when they were there? No. Something had to change. What changed? Yirat Shamayim. Yirat Shamayim. But unfortunately, sometimes people want to change, but they go to the bad, to people that pretend to be good, and in reality, they're worse than them. Like this joke that's very famous where a Reform guy goes to a Erev Rav rabbi and says, listen, Rabbi, I want to do my dog just died right after his bar mitzvah, bark mitzvah. I gave him bark mitzvah and he got a stroke 30 seconds later with the $2,000 tefillin on him. I want to have somebody read Kaddish for him. You have somebody? And the rabbi says, no, here we're Orthodox, we're modern, we're Orthodox, we're this, we're that. We don't do Kaddish on dogs. No. Oh, okay, Rabbi, listen, I had to check for $200,000 I was going to give you whoever's going to read Kaddish. And the rabbi said, hold on a second. Wait, hold on. What did you say? What was the name of the dog again? He said, what, my dog? Yeah, your dog. Moshe. Oh, why didn't you tell me he's Jewish? That's the joke. But in reality, it's a reality. In reality, there are some people in the world like that while we laugh, we cry. I generally don't allow myself to tell jokes during a lecture. Maybe in the beginning, maybe at the end, but not during. Why? You're not supposed to really give jokes. This is a real joke. There are some people that, as funny as that joke is, there are some people that are desecrating Torah just like that. Maybe not exactly that way, but in similar ways, where they know that the donor is a dog. The donor is someone that's not supposed to donate, you're not supposed to accept their money, but they accept it anyway. Why? No yirat shamayim. Same thing goes with people that help people launder money under their non-profit organization, where they say, listen, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to bring $50 million from Russia, and I want to transfer it over here without paying taxes to the government. Can I put it through your non-profit organization? Break the law in the name of a non-profit? What do you think? Yeah, just give us a 10% tzedakah. And that's what they do, and that's where you see all this disaster in the world, where you see big people that, for all intents and purposes, looked good, but ended up getting their hands dirty with dirty business. Should have never happened in the first place. Why? That's not your job. Your job is not to launder money. Your job is not to help people get out of their circumstances. Your job is to help people do tshuva. But sometimes when money comes to people, it blinds people. It blinds people in certain ways that would literally make the Torah look like it's all false, or you are. Now, Rav Palaji alav shalom also discussed these issues. In his response to Lev Chaim, in Chelek Bet Siman 175, he says the following: I swear to the heaven and the earth that on Yom Kippur, at such and such Bet Knesset, this was the story, where a mumar, a person that knows what the Torah is, but simply decides not to follow it, he wants to drive on Shabbat, even though he knows you're not allowed to drive on Shabbat. Why? He's like Dennis Prager. I'm not driving to the ball game. I'm just driving to shul, like one of those heretical types of practices. So a mumar donated a large sum of money to the Bet Knesset, to the community, during a year where the community was struggling. And despite that, I didn't allow them to give him an aliyah to the Torah. No matter what he did and how many times he asked, I refused to allow them to give him an aliyah to the Torah. How many? Doesn't matter. They came to me, they asked, no. They asked again, no. Yeah, but he donated a lot of money. Nobody else has any money. Doesn't make a difference. Why? In Siman 34b, Rav Palaji says, if there's a mumar who's a mechalel Shabbat, who wants an aliyah to the Torah, and you don't want to embarrass him in public, there's an halachic permission for the gabayim, for the gabay of the Bet Knesset, to outbid him with a fake bid, and to ensure that he doesn't win an aliyah. Otherwise, this is forbidden. You know, in Sephardic shuls mostly, sometimes I think there are some Ashkenazi shuls that also do this, but usually it's commonplace in Sephardic shuls, where to get an aliyah to the Torah, there's a bidding process, like an auction. And this is even done on holidays or on Shabbat, and it's permissible. They don't actually do the transaction of money during that time, but in essence, the bidding process is during, and it's allowed because that's usually when everybody comes to the shul. Anyway, these shuls, they have a bidding process. Who wants to get the first aliyah for the Kohen, for the Levi, for Israel? Then you have for Yom Kippur, you have 7 aliyot, and you have the Ptichat Eichal, Kol Nidre, and so on and so forth. So different people want to donate a different amount of money, and there's a bidding process of who's going to donate the most to get the aliyah. Now, traditionally, everybody's bid has to be legit, meaning that if you win, if your bid wins, you have to donate the money after the holiday, after Shabbat, whenever it is. You have to. You can't say, oh, no, I don't want to do it. You have to donate. You're making a promise, publicly especially. So the highest bidder wins. And you're not allowed to do a fake bid just to drive the price higher. That's Gnevat Dat, that's a sin from a Torah. Not allowed to do such a thing. To just say a bid knowing that the other guy is going to outbid you. Because he wants it, and you know he wants it, and you just want to drive it higher for the sake of the Bet Knesset, not allowed to do such a thing. But here Rav Palaji says, if there's someone, it's a Mechalel Shabbat especially, or as a Mumar in general, but in Mumar especially when it comes to Chilul Shabbat, and he wants to donate 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 100 million, it doesn't make a difference. The Gabbai of the Beit Knesset has the permission of the Torah to outbid him any bid that he makes, and it's a fake bid. No one's going to pay it. Meaning, it's better to get, the guy just bid $500,000 to open the Echal. That's it. He's not going to read from the Torah. He's not going to read the Haftarah. He's not going to do any of the special major things. He's going to open the Echal for Kol Nidre. Or he's going to do something just to open the Echal. If he's lo ra'ui because he's a mumar, or even if he's not really even that religious, the Gabbai has permission. The Gabbai has permission to outbid him with a fake bid. Otherwise, it's forbidden for the Gabbai to do such a thing. But it's allowed for him to do such a thing, he says. Especially if he's a Mechalel Shabbat. Or make any other excuse just to make sure he does not get an aliyah. Especially if he's mumar to violate Shabbat. And if one wants to get a certain aliyah or ma'ala, like opening the Eichal or Kol Nidre or things like that, and he's not really such a good fit for such an aliyah, he's not religious at all, or he's not righteous enough, even if he is religious, but he's not exactly a very righteous person, a lot of lashon hara about this person, he steals, he deals with all types of things that are not that are forbidden, and so on. Especially if he's a Mechalel Shabbat, it's not kavod for the Torah to give such a person an aliyah, especially in a place where they sell such aliyot. There's permission for the Gabbaim to outbid him with fake bids, so to avoid embarrassing him or the Torah. Meaning, you don't want to embarrass this guy. You could deal with him after, talk to him, listen, you got to do tshuva, so on and so forth. But that's one thing. But allowing him to open the Eichal, allowing him to get an aliyah, is an embarrassment for the Torah. Embarrassment for the Torah to allow such a person to get an aliyah. And in Chelek Bet, Siman 167:15, it says, be careful. Same Rabbi Chaim Palaji. Be careful that nothing forbidden is partners to the writings of a Torah scroll. And not just obvious sins like money being made on Shabbat, stolen money and so on, but even money from things that, like gambling. Don't take any of that money that somebody won from gambling for the sake of paying for a Torah scroll. Because even if the money was made from rental income, that somebody's renting a group of people that is using the apartment for like a casino, they're renting an apartment, this guy's got a building, and he's getting income from these guys that are renting the apartment or a few apartments to have a card game in there. Do not take the landlord's money. Not just the gambler's money. The landlord's money. He's getting money from rental income from those people. Don't take his money. For the sake of writing a Sefer Torah. Why? Because such a Sefer that's being written for money like that is not the will of Hashem. And therefore such a Sefer Torah will surely have mistakes in it and will be pasul. Just like we learned from the Baal Shem Tov, he says. Meaning that Hashem makes sure that any Sefer Torah campaign that is getting the money from people that have non-kosher money, they're making their money from charging people interest, making money on Shabbat, gambling, all types of unethical business, Hashem makes sure that the sofer makes mistakes. And therefore, their money is not contributing to anything kadosh. They're contributing to a Sefer Torah, but it's not a Sefer Torah unless it's 100% complete. If it has a single mistake in it, it's not a Sefer Torah. It's pasul. So Rav Palaji says, if you're going to have a Sefer Torah, make sure all the money that you use is kosher money. Kosher money. And last but not least, the Rav Palaji says, in Chelek Aleph Siman 40, he says, in the Korbanot, in Sefer Bayikra, Leviticus, we see that the parasha that talks about the korban olah, which is the gift korban, the elevation, comes before the parasha that discusses korban chatat, which is the sacrifice of the sin offering. But we know that the order of the korbanot, the sacrifices, if let's say they both came at the same time, somebody brought a korban olah, which is like a gift offering, as if you're giving a gift to HaShem, celebrating His name. At the same time, somebody that made an accidental sin, accidentally turned on the light on Shabbat, accidentally violated Shabbat or something like that. Accidentally. If it's on purpose, they kill him. But if it's accidental, he brings a sacrifice. So he brings a sacrifice because he made a mistake, and he brings a sacrifice because he wants to sanctify Hashem's name. They both came at the same time. Who do they let go first? Korban Chatat. Korban Chatat goes first. Why? He's in danger right now. So long as he has this accidental sin on him, there are demons around him, there's problems. You have to get him out of danger. You got to get this sin out of the account. And then we can honor Hashem and so on and so forth. So you have to save this guy first. So, Rav Palaji says, so how come, if we already know that the korban of the sin offering is the one that takes priority over the olah, the gift offering, then why does the Torah not have it written in that order? Why is the order the opposite? He says because the Torah is trying to teach us something. The Torah knows the creation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows His own creation. And He knows that His people are much more likely to donate money to sanctify His name than to admit that they sinned. And that's why it comes that way. A person is much more likely to make a donation, a big donation, to sanctify Hashem's name, to go build another yeshiva, to go donate $50, $100, $500,000, to go build another shul, another Sefer Torah, another this, another that. Yeah, donate for that money. Yeah. What about Tikkun Brit? No, Tikkun Brit. No, me. I don't even touch my face. You want me? Well, Tikkun Brit. No. The guy has 15 girlfriends. No, I'm never gonna admit it. Never gonna. What about Tikkun this, Tikkun? No, I don't sin. Everybody's no sin. Everybody's Ta'or veKadosh. Chabotai Karim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows His creation. The Chazon Ish, one of his shlichim, one of his messengers in a previous generation, tells us that in order for us to acquire the Torah, we have to be willing to sacrifice ourselves to acquire it, sacrifice our time, sacrifice our bodies, sacrifice our patience, sacrifice all of our character traits, sacrifice our ego, ultimately to acquire the Torah. But before any of that can become effective, we have to also understand that it's impossible to acquire Torah without having fear of the Almighty. We have to understand that fear of the Almighty is the foundation of the Torah. It's the oxygen of the world, and therefore without having it as the oxygen that we breathe, the words that we speak, and the practice that we, in essence, use in the world, none of the Torah that we have is really Torah. It's something else. Lo b'shamayim. It's not from heaven, this Torah. BeEzrat Hashem, this too will help us understand the magnitude of what Yirat Shamayim is, and even more so, allow us to know where we stand. Do we really have Torah, or do we have something we like? Did we get to the pleasantry of Torah, or we just are pleased by it because it suffices our desires? Is it really Torah because it makes sense to me, or it's Torah whether it makes sense to me or it doesn't make sense to me? Each and every single one of us has to be able to answer these questions. Of course, each and every one of us may not answer every one of those questions 100%, but at the very least, we need to know where we stand. If we know where we stand, then we know where we need to go. But if we constantly lie to ourselves and pretend that everything is okay, then of course we haven't understood anything what the Torah is trying to teach us. The Chazon Ish is in essence trying to help us rewire our neshamot in order to fulfill our purpose and to get to where we want to be. BeEzrat HaShem, we listen to him, we listen to Rav Palaji, we listen to Rav Ephraim, we listen to the Torah, most important, we listen to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu speak to us, to the Chachamim. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.
Seven years of lectures. Seven months of film editing. Countless hours of study by two rabbis. Information we received over 3,000 years ago. All for this moment. Whom had greed? The movie.
There's a small member in your body. It shouldn't take over your whole life. If you satiate it, you're never going to have enough.
The Sofer clan, when it gets a hold of something, it does not let go.
Time for us to rectify what we have done.
Normal numbers should be somewhere around 20 million or higher.
You're never going to have control of it. If you start it, and only feed it when it's permissible according to the Torah.
Pornography is as addictive as crack cocaine.
You're always going to be happy, including this world and the next. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen.